The Las Vegas Raiders have officially went out there and signed another cornerback, and today we're going to talk about what Erik Stokes brings to the Las Vegas Raiders. You have a guy that's a former first-round pick, 4 years with the Green Bay Packers, had a lot of injuries, wasn't able to really stay healthy, but this was a guy that had a ton of upside coming out of Georgia back in 2019. This was a guy that was a first-round pick by the Green Bay Packers, and this is a guy that has upside. And the Raiders are officially signing him to a 1-year contract worth $4 million. And it seems like the Raiders have a type of player that they're kind of trying to target. Right? It seems like the Raiders are bringing in guys that are long, that are big, that are versatile. Right? Jeremy Chinn's 6'3", Isaiah Pola-Mao, who was brought back, was 6'4". Erik Stokes is 6'1.5", and as a corner, that's long, right? That is long, that is tall. And it seems like the Raiders definitely have a type with how they're trying to construct this defense, and I think with a guy like Erik Stokes, it's a solid signing for the Raiders. Now, I don't expect Erik Stokes to come in and be a top 5 corner. He obviously hasn't proven that at this point. Being a first-round pick, he should have been a good, productive player. He hasn't been able to put it together, but I do think for the Las Vegas Raiders, we're at the point where Patrick Graham has proven himself multiple times. Right? Patrick Graham has been able to get guys like Jack Jones and get the most out of him. And I know Jack Jones isn't perfect, but Jack Jones has more interceptions for the Raiders than I've seen any other corner. Like, I don't even remember anyone for the Raiders that had the ball skills that Jack Jones has, right? And it's interesting because it's not just Jack Jones. You look at some of the safeties that we brought over, right? Like, Marcus Epps came over to the Raiders as a free agent, and when we brought him in, he came in here and he played really productive for the year that he was fully healthy, right? He was a solid safety. He was able to make some things happen. Robert Splain's another guy where he was a backup with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He came over to the Raiders, and he had a lot of success with the Raiders. But that's because Patrick Graham was able to kind of do that with some of these guys. Clavon Chason is another guy, right? Couldn't even make the Panthers roster. Coming out of training camp, they cut him as a camp body, basically. And the Raiders helped turn this guy's career around. Erik Stokes, to me, has so much upside. He has so much potential. When he came out in the NFL draft, I was wanting this guy for the Raiders, right? I wanted this guy to come to the Las Vegas Raiders. We needed a cornerback, and he was a guy that I really, really liked, right? And he ended up going 29th overall to the Green Bay Packers against 6'1.5", 195 pounds. The arm length, 32 3/4 inch arms. That's absolutely ridiculous. I don't think people understand that. The arm length that this guy has is longer. This guy's longer than Will Campbell coming out this year, right? This guy's arm length is longer than a guy who some people say is the number 1 offensive tackle coming out in this upcoming class. Again, long arms translates, right? It's one of those things that I shouldn't say it translates 100%, but it's one of those things that allows guys to be successful. And I'm not saying it's going to allow him to be successful, but I do like the fact that the Raiders are bringing in a guy where they're not spending a ton of money. It's a low-risk, high-upside type of contract. Again, the Raiders aren't spending a ton of money right now, and I'm okay with what the Raiders have done. We had 27 pending free agents coming into this offseason. We've signed about 10 guys, believe it or not. I know some people might be like, what have we done? We've signed about 10 guys, right? We brought some guys back that were already with this team. We brought in Alex Kappa, Erik Stokes. We brought in a linebacker corner the other day as well. So the Raiders are making moves. It might not be as flashy as a lot of people kind of want to see, but trust me when I say this, the moves that the Raiders are making in free agency, these are the moves that help you win long term, right? Erik Stokes, if he comes in for the Raiders and he competes, and let's say he's our rotational corner, or let's say he's the second corner behind Jack Jones, and let's say it's Jack Jones, Corey Bennett as their 2 starters, Erik Stokes on one side, and then maybe it's Cameron Richardson on the other side. To me, that's going to be perfect for the Las Vegas Raiders as we kind of go into this season. Erik Stokes might not be a superstar player, but I think there's upside here for the Raiders. I think it's a good signing. It doesn't cost a lot of money. And let's also let some of the other guys develop. I know a lot of people wanted the Raiders to go in. Jair Alexander is potentially available if someone wants to go out and get him. There was a couple other corners that have already signed at this point. Some teams or some people are saying, hey, the Raiders should go all in, try to get that corner, get a guy to compete with, take over for Jack Jones. Jack Jones is a good football player. I think a lot of people are wrong with Jack Jones, right? Especially since people oftentimes don't understand how schemes work in the NFL. It's not as easy as, hey, you're man to man with the guy. That's it. There's nothing else involved. There's so many different rules and concepts that a defensive coach is trying to kind of throw out there, right? You're trying to bait guys into throwing interceptions. Like the NFL's it's a hard place to have success. And there's a reason why when a coach like Dan Quinn has the success he has, he's able to have that, right? He's a very, very smart coach. And again, Patrick Graham's also a very, very good coach. I think Jack Jones gets a little bit too much hate. I think he's a good football player, and I think we're going to find out a lot this season, especially with the Raiders secondary, because we did lose some guys, but I think we'll be okay as we kind of get into the season. Love the Erik Stokes pickup for the Raiders. Again, low risk, high reward upside. We'll see what ends up happening. We did get another update that did kind of come out that I do want to get into, specifically with Kupp, who has been informed that he was going to be released today. Now, this isn't a surprise by any means. We all have already known at this point that Kupp was going to end up getting released or traded. Most people thought he would end up getting traded, but of course, it's hard finding trade partners, especially in the NFL today. There's so many wide receivers that are kind of available out there right now. The fact that you got to pay these guys like $30, $35 million makes teams not want to really put that money into it, right? Kupp, on the other hand, won't cost that type of money, but he was released. And he got a lot of Raider fans thinking, can the Raiders potentially bring this guy in? And Tashawn Reed of The Athletic said that the Raiders would have interest if the price is right per sources, but it's hard to see Kupp taking a discount to join a franchise in flux. Well, first and foremost, I don't agree with Tashawn Reed. I think that's super negative to say that Kupp will take a discount to join a franchise in flux. I think that's kind of stupid, truth be told. The Raiders are not a franchise in flux, right? This team's in a really, really, really good spot. All right, I think some people might be sleeping, Tashawn Reed, for example. But the Raiders are in a very solid spot if you think about what they've kind of done this offseason. Geno Smith, you get your franchise quarterback. At least for the next 3 to 5 years, you get a quarterback that can potentially help get you into the playoffs, maybe compete when playoffs actually come around. You have a defensive line that's arguably the best defensive line in the NFL. That gives you a chance no matter what team you're going up against. We saw, how hard Patrick Mahomes has struggled with the pass against that defensive line. And it's always not been healthy. And truth be told, I don't think Mahomes has ever seen the D-line the Raiders currently have right now on paper. And if this defensive line's healthy when that time comes, week 1 or whenever it ends up being, this defensive line's going to be very, very difficult to block. But with that being stated, the Raiders are in a really good spot, in my opinion. I think we're in the best spot we've been 20 years, arguably, right? Maybe 2016 was probably the other year, especially since we had a quarterback in DC, we had Amari Cooper, and we had all that kind of going. But right now, where the Raiders are currently at, they're in a really, really good spot. They do have to shore up just a couple things, right? You got to get a guard, maybe a tackle, right? And if you get a tackle, DJ Glaze ships over to guard. Just getting a right tackle, right? Like a franchise right tackle. Let's say you draft a guy with pick 6. DJ Glaze goes to guard, Kappa goes to right guard or left guard, or wherever you want to put him. That fixes up your offensive line, right? So like one move, a guy ships over, fixes your O-line. Second round comes, get a running back. And in the second round this year, you're going to get a top 10 running back in the NFL. You add in a guy like Kupp with what we already have on offense, Geno Smith, we've already brought him over. That's a competent as offense. That offense can make playoffs and make a push given that the defensive line is able to do their thing. So again, I think for the Raiders, Kupp's a very interesting wide receiver. Kupp would be the number 1 wide receiver for the Raiders, right? Or he'd be that true X wide receiver. He might not be the number 1 target necessarily, right? That'd probably be Brock Bowers at this point. Even Jacoby Myers would fight a lot with Kupp with the targets, but Kupp is a true X wide receiver. And to me, if you're the Las Vegas Raiders, why would you not potentially bring in a guy like Kupp? Now, of course, it depends how much he wants, right? If Kupp wants, $20 million, that doesn't make sense for the Raiders. But if you can bring him in 1 year, $14 million, for example, keep in mind the wide receiver market is very, very, very high. $14 million, I'd be okay with that, especially since you could take some of that, put it into next year. To me, that would be a good contract for Kupp because you're bringing in a guy that's experienced. You might draft a wide receiver in round 4 or 5. Kupp can help develop that wide receiver. We have some other young guys that he can help kind of develop, right? I think Kupp's a very intriguing football player for the Raiders. Now, he's not going to put up 1,500 yards for you, of course. He's up there in age. but he's a good football player. And if you can get him at not even necessarily a discount, but if you can get him at a price point that makes sense, maybe it's 12 million, 14 million might be on the high end, but maybe it's like 12 million, right? And you bring him in around that. If it works, why not, right? I'd definitely be interested in it. I think Kupp could be a solid player. And the fact that the Raiders would have interest, according to Sean Reed, we'll see what ends up happening with that. And then finally, Jordan Schultz has reported this, and I kind of want to talk about this a little bit. Schultz said that sources have told him the Patriots have had discussions on trading quarterback Joe Milton and would like to trade him to the right situation to continue his development in the NFL should a deal get done. I want to talk about this right here. Joe Milton, to me, has huge potential. Milton came out. He obviously had an injury, and people weren't 100% sure, will he be 100%? Will he be a good quarterback? And it was more so of the injury concern, right? It wasn't that, will he actually be a good quarterback? Because in college, the guy was a phenomenal quarterback. And if he was fully healthy, he could have been picked as high as the second round. In the NFL, generally speaking, most of the franchise quarterback go in the first round. And then the guys with like long-term backup potential, right? Like the Geno Smiths, for example. These guys generally go in like round 2 to 4, maybe 5. Some guys will go 6 or 7, and those guys kind of develop, and then sometimes they'll end up starting and be good quarterbacks. We've seen it happen, right? Joe Milton, to me, is one of those guys that could be in that same mold, right? He can fit in that same mold. And if you're the Las Vegas Raiders, Geno Smith's a really, really, really good quarterback, but he's 35 years old. Would it make sense to bring in a quarterback like Milton where he could sit, right? He's already played in the NFL for 1 year. He hasn't really played, but he did come in for Drake May a little bit last year, and he did play some games last year. But he's still really young, and for the Raiders, I think it's one of those things that you got to consider, bringing in a backup quarterback that has potential, but that's also similar to Geno Smith, right? We know, like, for example, Aiden O'Connell is nothing like Geno Smith, right? Aiden O'Connell and Geno Smith are the opposite quarterbacks. To me, if you're the Las Vegas Raiders, you have to realistically consider bringing in a quarterback for long-term developmental purposes. A guy that could sit for 2 to 3 years, a guy that can develop, right? He can learn, he can get better, but he's not expected to be the guy. And the thing with Milton is he's never going to be the guy with the New England Patriots because the Patriots also drafted another rookie quarterback at the same time in Drake May. And again, I don't think it even makes sense for the Patriots to keep Milton on their roster. And I also don't think there's that much of a trade market for him, truth be told. Every team has a quarterback at this point, right? The Titans are the only team that really don't. I think the Giants might not either. It looks like Aaron Rodgers is going to end up with the Steelers. To me, every team minus the Titans, Giants have quarterbacks, and I believe the Giants will end up meeting with Russell Wilson at some point. They might have a quarterback. The Titans have the number 1 overall pick. They're going to take Cam Ward. Teams just don't need quarterbacks, and there's still other quarterbacks that are still technically available as well. I think for the Raiders, Joe Milton's, he's not going to command a top 3 or 4 round pick, right? The Patriots probably let him go for like a 6th, 7th round pick. If you're the Raiders, you have to realistically consider bringing in Milton. Now, if it's not Milton, I think Jalen Milroe is another guy that you can potentially bring in that could sit and develop for like 2 years before you kind of roll with him, maybe 3 years, right? The thing with Jalen Milroe, in my opinion, is I think he's going to be out of reach for the Raiders. I think some team's going to take him in the top 2 rounds. I think some team's going to see the potential in him. They're going to say, we're going to take this guy. And for the Raiders, they're not in position to take a quarterback in the 2nd round right now because the Raiders have to fix a couple of things, right? You got to get a tackle. You got to potentially get another interior offensive lineman. So that might be your 2nd round pick there. You need a running back, right? That might be your 1st round pick. You can still potentially add a wide receiver in the draft. You might need a D tackle or DN for long term, right? Malcolm Koonce only a 1-year contract. So the Raiders are probably not in a position where they're going to spend a quarterback on Milroe, and I think Milroe ends up going in the top 2 rounds. He has so much potential and so much upside, and I heard a lot of good things about him specifically from the combine. He apparently impressed a lot of people, so I don't think he's going to be available, but like he's another guy I would consider if I'm the Raiders. If it's not Milroe, I think Milton's another guy, right? So I just wanted to kind of throw it out there. Do you guys think that the Raiders should get a developmental quarterback? And again, Aiden O'Connell's a developmental quarterback, but I think he's a little bit different because he's limited, right? There's not a lot of upside with Aiden O'Connell that we haven't already kind of seen, right? So I want to know what you guys think, man. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Would you take a quarterback like Milton, 6th, 7th round pick, maybe Milrow if he falls to like round 4 or 5? Let me know what you guys think, man. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.